the project is actually partly my own project because I was the architect and my partner was really the client. The brief was kind of dictated in large part by the property because it was an existing building. So the constraints of the existing spaces and then of course budget. This building is actually a new townhouse that used to be one house over 3 stories and the basement. And then in the 1970s, it was divided into apartments. So we're on the top floor. It was already kind of adapted quite considerably from the original townhouse. That in many ways gave the flexibility to do a little bit more than you might otherwise do on some of the lower levels. So the interior wasn't very precious anymore. It was more the idea of the flat belonging to the rest of the house, which is why we ended up incorporating the glazed screen that connects the stairwell to the hallway and brings in a lot of light and kind of reestablishes that connection that once would have been between the hallway and the stair and the other rooms as well. There's a really nice relationship, I think, between the simplicity of the interior of the flat and then the decorative features of the shared spaces. In the hallway, we made the decision to lift all the door lintels. It gives you this generosity of scale in what would otherwise be quite a tight little corridor. The central kind of core space in the middle, that's where all the services and the bathroom and drainage and everything is. That's the piece that articulates the other spaces. So it separates and connects the 2 main living spaces, the public spaces. But one of the biggest things about the brief was the fact that Lachlan, my other half, he's a chef. And so the dominant feature in the flat was this kitchen. That was really the kind of the main focus, that we had to have a space that could expand and contract and be predominantly kitchen with people in that space dining and then connected through to another living space. So that's kind of the thing that formulated the main moves of the project. What Lachlan wanted to do here was that we would have supper clubs here as well. So the space had to be able to accommodate a sort of daily use so that we could live in it, but it had to be able to accommodate larger groups of people, maybe 10 people. So the kitchen is in that linear arrangement, which is atypical, but it also means that the dining space can accommodate a big long table, and the table can be shorter or longer depending on how many people you've got. And he said that when he started to work in it, it felt a bit more like a commercial kitchen than a domestic kitchen, which I think works for him. We tried to keep the palette of materials quite limited, so there are only a few different materials that are used. You know, the budget wasn't massive on this project, so we had to use sort of modest materials, but kind of elevate them so that they have a certain quality, but that they can also be maintained. This kind of finish that we've got on the cabinetry, that's a birch plywood that has a stain and then an oil finish on top. And if there's any damage to that and scratches and things, then it can be repaired. We worked with the manufacturer of the stain to begin with on developing how it was applied and the consistency of finish that you could get across different panels. And so we learned that it was really quite important for it all to be done by the same person and roughly speaking at the same time, so that you knew that everything was being done in the same way. And then the worktop, so that's stainless steel, and it's a 3mm sheet of stainless steel. So it's robust, it's utilitarian, but the edge detail, just taking it over as a really thin edge, means that it doesn't appear like a commercial kitchen. It's got a kind of elegance to it. That's the way we thought about simplicity, hopefully that has a bit of longevity that we could afford. On that as well, there had never ever been any central heating in the property. So we ended up going back and forward about different systems and decided on an underfloor system that's electric. We've also got an electric hot water system that ultimately could be hooked up to solar panels. There's also some roof lights in the centre of the plan. So there's the dual aspect. We've got windows on both sides. We've got the stairwell that light comes in and the roof lights. So natural light quality is really good. And then where we could, we tried to improve the thermal performance of the envelope. But again, going back to the material specification, things that were simple, robust or repairable, and things that we liked and had a kind of classic simple detailing, means that we hope that they last not just like not just practically and physically last, but they last in terms of their aesthetic.
We were looking for a property to purchase and use as a rental property, and then found this block in Leith that was built in 1975. There's car garages across from it. It's the old railway bridge. It's the bottom of Leith Walk. It's busy. It's kind of pretty vibrant. That development that was done in the 70s that had a flat that was in quite a poor condition. There was no heating. We'd only ever had one owner, so in terms of the bones of it and the fabric was still quite good. We saw the sort of possibility in it. It's a really simple building, a really simple plan and simple construction, and something we thought we could really work with.
As a landlord, would be creating a home for someone that also included our taste and our kind of creativity, that we didn't have to be bland. We could be quite bold in what we were creating. We
had originally some contractors on board to do some key bits like the heating and new windows and stuff, but very quickly we ended up taking on much bigger roles in terms of joinery, fitting, finishes, and whilst we're doing that, we're constantly starting to question and talk about and think about the junction and the finish. You
know, for instance, finding the concrete pillar. Now, it wasn't all concrete. Part of it was brick and part of it was concrete plaster, so micro-concrete. That wasn't necessarily something that we could have known had we not been the people stripping back and doing all the hard graft ourselves as well. We love that little random concrete pillar in the middle of the building.
Like there's a little gas pipe that pops up. So rather than trying to hide that, it was just like, well, I'll just polish it up and make it.
And so rather than us imposing our opinion and our design ideas on the building, we reacted to what it was telling us as well.
You look at the flooring, which is this OSB flooring, we've sort of thought, no, we shouldn't do that because it's a flat that somebody else is going to live in. Why would we put OSB flooring down? And then you realise, well, it's actually a lot cheaper than the materials we could get. It's more durable, it's more effective in terms of its visual impact.
And particularly for the open plan aspect of the property, it meant that we could make the whole thing, all the rooms kind of interconnect.
And then once that material's then in the building and you have it as a part of your palette, then it ends up on the wall and it helps us blend in walls and floors and making it a really punchy kind of visual as well.
I felt that there needed to be some definition between the private and public spaces. We're both quite fans of angles and being a little bit less uniform, and also why does it have to be just on the floor? Can those angles be included on the wall and that continue up through? So making the space with effectively one really simple crisp line, really punchy, but also it divides the space, I think, really well.
Yeah, it works really well with the OSB and it has got that kind of street art sort of feeling to it. But there's also a key part of it is that the bits that are stained black get the most amount of traffic.
Yeah.
So in terms of thinking long term, we can restain that thing black, whereas the natural part obviously doesn't wear quite as well. We stumbled into finding a 70s kitchen on Facebook, which was in immaculate condition. And it's a really good quality kitchen, so we thought, why not use it? Just because someone might not like an orange kitchen, and again, it's not for us, but we think there's enough people who would value that.
Like with some of the cupboards, everything is quite calm and muted, but you open it up and there's something a little bit more interesting going on. But because we were making it, we had that opportunity to have a little bit more fun.
There's a limit to what we could have done with the outside of the building. We had to replace all the windows, so that already helped. We had to put a new heating system, so that again, these things all benefit the running costs and how it operates. By taking one wall out, the warmth of the sun starts to warm more spaces. Reusing the kitchen, using hardware and materials like the OSB, something that's going to last. So it's more about probably longevity. There's stuff we'd love to do, like it's crying out for solar panels on the roof, but that's not a type of thing that we can achieve on our own in a short period of time. It's a really good building, and you just demolish them and build new ones, which would be a complete waste and hugely more carbon onerous, whereas like one by one, we're trying to show that this is what you could achieve in this place. So if we've convinced anybody, I suppose, that apartment is better than something else, then we're doing the right thing.
the job was for us to move into a much larger space. We got the rental on a 4 times the size of our previous store space, and it was to turn it into this kind of haven that would work hard for customers, work hard for us as the team running it, and see us through many years to come on our lease as a fashion retailer.
Yeah, so the initial brief was just for us to produce the metal railings for the clothes and maybe redecorate the existing space.
But we were seeing this space at an amazing time of year. It had perfect lighting that was coming through. We were fully south facing, as you can see all this gorgeous light that's in here just now. And we decided that by doing just a little bit and sort of basically putting paint or plasterboard on top of years of what previous people and tenants had done was not going to give us the full wow factor that we wanted. We tested out with GRAS advice, we tested out a couple of different areas and found that there was decades of previous wallpapers and plasterboards and timber and everything. And we stripped it right back, which led us to find all these amazing curves that you can see in the store. And we also gained space on all of the rooms. We gained like a good chunk of space, which for hanging rails with clothing on is exactly what you want to hear as a client. It left us with a lot of opportunity to make quite small but very impactful decisions to keep the original stairs, keep the original fireplace, but just add our touch of identity on top of it.
At the beginning, we were thinking about how to translate the sustainable ethos that comes with Treen as a brand, and how to translate it into like a spatial design, rather than just to simply redecorate the existing space, which led to certain material choices. There are natural materials that will have kind of patina or wear and tear, and we understand their life process.
It worked out that going for natural and more sustainable materials that age gracefully and age beautifully and need touched up over time, just like a dress or a blazer needs repaired, nurturing the space rather than just thinking, oh, it's bash now, let's replace it. That's very much what we wanted to avoid and harness within the space as well.
One thing is the locally sourced wood, the metal railings that are coming like with this beautiful sheen on them. So we didn't coat them in any color, just the raw quality of the. So the metal railing also follows this like natural line around the curvature of the walls, and it goes into another room, the fitting room.
Like a continuous line.
And also the fact that we had like this incredible network of local makers and people that were available to us despite the lockdown, that were welcoming this project and felt excited about it. And then maybe that's something too that we cherish the most, this conversation with makers and the fact that we engaged them in the design process quite early on. So they had like this understanding what we tried to achieve. We communicated quite heavily.
Like, we are a vegan fashion retailer. Our sustainability and ethics is at the core of our business. So for the materials we wanted to use in the space and all the local makers that we wanted to work with and natural materials, we realized by doing that full strip out was going to actually allow us to use them to the maximum of their ability and show them off. Clayworks is a natural clay plaster that is made in the UK. It keeps for a very long time, so we've bought a little bit extra when we made our one order so that we were only using one shipment to not go back and forth. We can then do touch-ups using that Clayworks, so that also hits in on us thinking more sustainably when we're making a large purchase. And the wood, the metalwork, the clay itself, they were all materials that we chose. They look very soft, but they're designed to last a very long time, and they will age in a certain way that will still just add to the character of the store and the character of the space.
Actually, this impression of something that changes through time is so at the core of Treen, and I think like it's something that is not very often met in commercial environments. So this time perception through material changes is like such a wonderful concept.
Absolutely.
That we were so grateful to be able to observe, and like we welcome changes.
So the main townhouse was only the ground floor, the second floor and an attic space, but the basement was actually, which gave a connection out to the garden, was underneath the next door house.
There's a lot of townhouses in Edinburgh that get split up. They take the basement away, and the basement is then given the garden. What you then end up with is a 2-storey townhouse with no outside space.
And as part of the development, Ian was keen to separate off the basement flat. So we had to work out a way of maintaining access to a bit of garden space and the communal garden space beyond that, which is fantastic in that block.
An extension there would help to create that link with the garden and also draw more light back into that basement area at the ground floor level. I don't recall exactly at what point we decided an extension was required. But it was fairly early on in the whole process.
The idea was that we wanted like a period kind of building, but with contemporary next to it. I think it mixes well.
It's an interesting, literally, in this project, our hands were tied by the planning department and actually getting listed building consent and planning consent for this building. The original scheme that we submitted had a Corten exoskeletal structure with glass infill round about it, and the colours of the Corten were chosen because of the ready hues that were in the stonework behind. So that was all going to work. But when that was turned down, and the planning department, in the discussions we had with the planning officer afterwards, it became pretty clear. Look, if you want to get planning consent for this, it's going to have to be invisible effectively. So there's only one building material, and that's glass. And that's where the concept of this ghost extension came up, so that the basic form of the outshoots that are on the back of this terrace of houses would read as in their original form, and this little extension, which could be made solely of glass, which it is, apart from the aluminium frame to the sliding door system. It's all glass to glass connections. The glass is pocketed into the back of the stonework on the back elevation of the house, triple glazed, high specification you can get in triple glazing as far as I can understand. And the sliding door system along the front is again triple glazed, 25mm sight lines on the frame, so it is absolutely as visually minimal as possible, so that it sits and allows the rest of the terrace, the back elevation of this terrace, to speak for itself.
The end product, when you do actually see the ghost extension next to the the original stone extension, it does look amazing. That, again, getting back to the period and contemporary, it just blends so well.
It's got the highest heat retention possibilities, U value, as possible, and Ian went into a lot of effort to take down the original stone outshoot, slim the stones down, rebuild it in its exact same dimensions and height, reusing the stonework. There was some stone which was in poor condition, and Ian had to reform by slimming down the external leaf, putting a cavity in, an insulated timber frame inner leaf, a huge amount of insulation in the new roof that was put on top, and then there's a great big roof light that was put into the original outshoot roof to bring additional light in at that side.
A thick amount of insulation underneath there was a new slab and screed went in. That was taken all the way back into the existing house.
So we put underfloor heating in that whole room as well, which again, it's the only area that in the whole house that I've done that, but it kind of keeps the whole minimum look down there, but that ended up a wonderful idea as well,
What's there, despite being so much glass, is a whole lot better than what was there beforehand, and the sort of the conservation of the listed building, and the quality of the conservation area maintained by doing this. It's an incredible feat. It's a beautiful space.
In the height of the summer, it can be you can go into it because the building's working properly, and it's not that hot that it can't be used. And then in the height of the winter, it doesn't become this frozen room that can't be used. So I've experienced it all year round, and it can be used all year round, and that to me was really important.
So the old Schoolhouse is a community building in Morningside. It was originally built in 1823 as the school for the local area, and unfortunately due to the kind of changing population and they outgrew the building. Since that time it's primarily been used as a place of worship and a community building. So our clients, Cornerstone, they were gifted the building in 2013. It was in desperate need of upgrading. The fabric itself was in poor condition. Over the course of the building's history, there were a number of alterations that had been made that really changed the character of the building and specifically how it functioned. And our client Cornerstone came to us to try and address those issues.
And a core part of Cornerstone's brief was to enhance the capacity of this relatively small building to the greatest possible extent. And that was really the core driver as we developed the brief with Cornerstone. And the core concept of that was reversing the process of adding accommodation. And in a way, we had to take a step back and look at the accommodation and the building as a whole. And there was a lot of dialogue, not only with the management team within Cornerstone, but with community groups surrounding Cornerstone. One of the core things to come from our briefing exercise was a space that was uncluttered, that could accommodate a diverse range of users without feeling as if any user was in another user's space, so that it could offer more opportunity for community use.
But at the same time, improving the existing fabric. And so a fabric first approach was taken to try to reduce energy consumption, look at how we could improve the thermal properties of the building, solar gain, natural daylight, air tightness, all together to try and extend the life of the building first and foremost. You know, there were a number of challenges with the kind of physical constraints of the building, and one of the ways that we resolved that was actually through altering the existing extension to the north and then actually replacing the extension to the south. And that was very much key to actually realising the brief and in fact releasing the space of the main hall, increasing that space. We took a very sensitive approach to what we added. We chose to use brick and precast externally, and these were both key to realising that vision, but also we chose them to be complementary to the existing stone.
The new construction has a rhythm and a relief that is inherently connected with the massing and the order of the surrounding context in terms of the original building's detail, but also at a macro level in terms of the surrounding context, including the large tenements and their ordering in the context of Morningside.
The new extension to the south provides a new entrance to the building and also a new identity. It's a very simple building in a way. It's a small building. What we have tried to do is to simplify the connections between the internal spaces, but also reconnect those to the surrounding area, which makes the building feel much larger than it is. One of the key things that we tried to do was to look how we could introduce inhabited walls. So that can be anything from storage facilities to integrated audio and visual equipment. The kitchen is almost one part of that kind of furniture, if you like. Each of the spaces are filled with daylight and, you know, really do change through the course of the day. And this was really important for us to transform the building, to make it a warm and welcoming public building for all to use.
We certainly believe that building utilisation being fundamental to creating sustainable spaces in the cities that we live and work in. That translated into a number of simple solutions in terms of remote management, remote systems that are accessible by the client remotely. For instance, they can unlock and manage the building's security remotely. They can also assist with the AV equipment, totally remote of the site. It's simple elements that and considering those at an early stage were really key to I suppose creating a building that was fit for purpose and sustainable for our client to use throughout the future.
Heating systems and lighting have all been fitted with sensors and smart controls, as well as meters, so that they can actually properly assess the energy consumption and monitor that. And one of the things that we've agreed to do with our client is to really look at closely at the post occupancy evaluation to learn and to keep changing and make sure that the building is operating to an optimum level, and ensure that the community could go on using the building for many years to come.